See, this is embarrassing. This is the first one back, and I forgot to hit the record button so I can pull it off the board for the podcast after we do the broadcast. Hello, everybody. Give me 1 second. So I'm just going to
That's
restart
cool.
that
I'm
music
I'm
now.
very happy to listen to Lex talk about the Unix system again.
I
That's
know
really
it does make me happy every time.
wonderful.
Something comforting about it.
It's beautiful.
Ken, it's got the code. It's going to launch.
It's a Unix system. I know this. It's all the files of the whole park. It tells you everything.
Sir, he's uploading the virus.
Eagle One, the package is being delivered.
Hello out there on the internet. I am Matthew Galt, and this is Cyber. On February 4th, 2023, an F-22 fighter jet committed its first air-to-air kill. The first air-to-air kill in the weapon's history. It was an alleged Chinese spy balloon near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And in the days that followed, the F-22 would score another kill, this time against a mysterious object above the Yukon. But this second object probably hadn't come from China, and hobbyists, in fact, believe it is one of their balloons. And across the world, there is a small but dedicated group of people who love launching tiny balloons into the sky. And it's been a weird month for that community, what with the fighter jets up there shooting things down and the constant report of UFOs. And today, Motherboard reporter Becky Ferreira is here to talk to us about that amateur balloonist community. She has spent time talking to them about the great balloon panic of 2023, and she's here to tell us all about it. Becky, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Matthew. How are you?
I think we're both recovering from various things, so
Mhm.
there's going to be some muting and coughing in this podcast slash live stream, but I'm doing better, much better.
That's so good to hear. Yeah, me too.
All right, so let's go over the basic facts
Mhm.
for people that might be listening later, or for people that for whatever reason didn't follow this madness over the past month. Why are we talking about balloons? What happened in February?
Right. Well, it was such a weird flare up. So in early February, there were a bunch of reports, mostly like people just on the ground of this bizarre unidentified object. I think the one that really raised the profile was in Montana. This guy that speculated it was of extraterrestrial origin, right? But then it got confirmed by the Department of Defense shortly after that NORAD had been tracking this giant balloon that originated in China as it passed across Alaska through northern Canada and eventually went through the continental US. And China maintains that it was a scientific balloon that got blown off course, but the US and Canadian intelligence communities both say that was a surveillance balloon. It was shot down, as you mentioned, on February 4th off of South Carolina. And the early findings from the recovery of the materials from it suggest, according to the intelligence and communities, that it had surveillance equipment and geolocating communications equipment on it.
Right, I think it's important to state we're going to talk about a couple different objects here, but this first one, China did own it. They said it was theirs, and that it was like a normal weather balloon, right? There's nothing shady going on.
That's what they said, yeah.
That's what they say. Then what are these other? But then, like over the next couple days or the next week, a whole bunch of other objects are in the sky that become of great concern. How did all of that play out?
Yeah, there were three other objects that were downed by these jets between February 10th and 12th. One was in over Alaskan waters, one was in the Yukon, and one was over Lake Huron. And they were way, way, way smaller. Like the Chinese alleged spy balloon, was like 200 feet tall. It was carrying a payload that was thousands of pounds. It was gigantic, and if you see images of it, they're taken from some of the people who were flying by it and stuff. It's huge. These balloons are objects that have not been like actually confirmed to have been smaller balloons yet, but they were more on the size of like a couple feet across and were carrying very small payloads. And I think the most that Biden has said about those balloons or those objects is that, they had a benign purpose. They were research balloons as far as people know. And they were so small that none of them had been recovered at all. Like they're just, yeah, like not very much bigger than a party balloon.
Right. I've got a photo of the original one pulled up,
Exactly. Huge.
which was from an Air Force pilot that took a selfie before they shot it down, which I think is really incredible.
Yeah.
And this was
Classic.
a photo confirmed by the Pentagon and then uploaded to its like websites later. But yeah, this is a large object, right?
Yeah. It's really, really gigantic. And that's why they were able to recover so much, I think, of it. And you can see like the giant panels, and it was so many, many orders of magnitude of the kind of balloons that are being launched by this amateur community. I mean, it's like they basically can't be compared. They're completely different systems.
Yeah, I think somebody described like the weight of it as being it's like a grocery store balloon with some pennies attached to it.
Attached, basically, yeah. They're the technical definition of these pico balloons. They're under 4 pounds, but most of them are like way, 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 way less than that. Even that they're just a couple grams is the payload. They're really meant to be just an affordable and fun way to explore. And they're yeah, a lot of they're essentially the silver balloons you would get at a grocery store.
So, what is you talked to this community quite a bit. You interviewed several of them. What was their experience like watching all of this play out on television
Yeah.
while they know more about balloons than the average citizen, right?
Hmm.
What was their feeling as all of this was playing out?
Well, you can imagine it was surreal for anybody, right? Because it was such a strange story. And so for them, it was just like such a mix of emotions. Some were really worried, some were thought it was funny. There's a lot of these forums and listservs and stuff like that that people post on. They were joking around, being like, the military should be charging us for target practice and things like that. But it's a twitchy kind of time. So some of them were really concerned that this was going their hobby, which is just very benign and done for fun, was going to somehow cause an international incident. And so there was a lot of worries about whether their hobby is now going to be regulated more. And also just like kind of feeling bad that their balloons were potentially targeted and downed by these jets. And getting into the mainstream attention that way. I think they were very bewildered. And then the silver lining for some of them is just that there's been so much attention now for the pico ballooning community that they are seeing a lot more people being interested in getting involved and launching for themselves.
Let's back up and talk about this thing that was over or it was over the Yukon.
Yeah.
We've the White House has now admitted that it was probably a hobbyist balloon, if I recall correctly, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they said hobbyist, but they said that it was like benign research balloon, like, or research object. Yeah.
Right. And so this ballooning community believes they know specifically which one it was, right? Can you walk me through what they know and how they know it?
Yeah, so they have this very like comprehensive tracking system. These balloons carry trackers, and they often carry radios and very lightweight equipment. So they have this world map that shows where the balloons are, and they all have like their call signs and things like that. So um, and so I felt really bad. Like one of the people I quote in the article was just kind of watching the map in the days after this downing of the Chinese balloon, and just seeing, oh my God, like there's pico balloons that are going to come into the Yukon and come into Alaska. What's going to happen? And it's those two in particular, the Alaskan and the Yukon downings, that they believe are that were probably pico balloons because they appeared on the map, and they were described by the military as kind of being similar to pico balloons. One, I think, was described as having the balloon had the width of a small car, which is about the size that some of them are. And the one that was downed in Lake Huron, there's a Northern Illinois club for ballooning that believes it was their particular one because they stopped hearing from it, coincident with it falling off the map. So
Yeah, I have to read this sentence in your piece, or a piece of it. The balloon was called K9YO15, and the club is named the Northern Illinois Bottle Cap Balloon Brigade,
yeah,
which feels like such an adorable Cub Scout name for something like this. And it had circled the world 6 times over the course of several months before its fatal and deadly counter with an F-22.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to just imagine these things are just wispy little things, like some of the people I talked to were just really surprised that they could even be shot down at all. Like they're just, how can you lock onto something like this? So it was a bit of an overreaction, I think.
Yeah, I'm honestly impressed that a Sidewinder missile was able to hit something so small. It's kind of impressive, really. Okay,
Yeah.
so why do people do this? Why is this a hobby?
Oh, I mean, for the most part, it's just fun, I think, for them. Even I was having fun looking at their tracking maps, and, they have like the predictions of where they're going to go based on jet streams. So people just, they're launching these little balloons with very, very lightweight equipment. A lot of these balloons cost less than $20 to launch. So it's like super accessible. And then you're just watching something, you're going around the world. Not all of them are successful. It's a little bit more technical than you might think, given that they're pretty simple looking. But um, for the ones that make it up there, they can go on for over a year. They can go around the world multiple times, a dozen or more times. And so that's just like really kind of a fun thing to be engaged in. Then they also, a lot of them collect weather data that is used to support like NOAA and other weather agencies, meteorological agencies. They're very common now for high school projects, science projects, and things like that, because they're so affordable and it's so fun to kind of track them. People in the ham radio community use them for their kind of exploratory projects. So I think just the fact that they are so cheap and easy to launch, and there's not a huge barrier to entry, it basically is anybody who just kind of wants to have a fun science project. And I don't want to minimize it just to make it seem like it's recreational, because they do support scientific research as well. But I think that's what is kind of interesting about the community, is that there's a lot of different backgrounds, and it's a very friendly and like welcoming, like open community in
It
that way.
seems so wholesome somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is another reason that makes it such a weird story, right? Like these people just doing this really fun hobby, and often like engaging kids in it, and then there's military jets. Allegedly, I think that's still all circumstantial, but it seems like very strong circumstantial evidence that they're getting in the crosshairs of these, very expensive jets. So yeah, it's very.
Pardon me. What does it cost to put one of these up in the air?
I mean, it really depends, but it can be under like $20. I think the one that I think was shot down over the Yukon was like $14 or something like that. They have really simple instruments. They're very simple balloons. You can certainly do more complicated things, but from what I've read, $200 and fewer is like usually the price range.
So, $143 million stealth tactical fighter jet, shooting a $400,000 missile to take down
$14.
around 14 bucks worth of equipment. And like what is involved in sending one of these things up? Like what are the specs? Like what do you need to do it?
So actually, I didn't get that much into the technicalities of it in this article. So I think it must depend a lot. But there's like a lot of really helpful people on these communities that will just like tell you what you need to do and stuff, and how to launch them. I think you basically have a solar cell, very small solar cells, a radio tracker, instruments if you want them, all of which are going to just weigh a couple pounds a couple grams. And then I think you can just you launch them, and they're most places, because these things are so small, if they're under 4 pounds, you don't need to like notify the FAA or anything like that. There's just like no chance of these. They note in the article, like if you just let your party balloons go after a party, they could be going around the world the same way, right? So it's like just really impractical to be regulating them, because they're not really the risk of any kind of interference with an airplane or anything like that is really small, because they're just so tiny.
Right, but the another thing that I thought was really interesting about this story is that this is a pretty new hobby.
Yeah.
What has happened in the last 10 years that's laid the groundwork for people sending up amateur balloons with, little tiny weather systems on them.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. That surprised me too. And so ballooning in general, amateur ballooning is many decades old, and then of course, like the history of ballooning is centuries old. But the basically regulations to make balloon like to limit the size of balloons kind of created a mother necessity is the mother invention kind of a situation where limits placed on how big of a balloon you could put up in the last 10 years kind of created this whole situation of like, well, if we can't do larger balloons, let's create all these much smaller platforms. And with that, they started creating smaller radios, smaller solar cells, and basically created this entire little subculture of very, very small balloons within like the past decade or so. And I think it's only kind of really started gotten rolling in the past couple of years. So it's the pico ballooning in particular is very new, and it surprised me as well, because you think this would be a little bit more of a legacy technology, but I think they didn't have to push it to the limits of how small it is. And then I think it's picked up also just because now that they're so small and these instruments are so lightweight, they're way more affordable for anybody. So and the regulations are different everywhere, but one thing that was really highlighted to everyone I talked to and all around the community reading their forums and things like that is they obey the regulations where they are, and they're very light usually. Like I said, in the US, you don't have to tell the FAA or anything because it's like letting a party balloon go. So yeah.
There was another thing that kind of shocked me about all this was that people are watching the skies obsessively right now. Yeah. For a bunch of different reasons. I mean, we can get into the UAP stuff here in a minute. I know how much we both love that. But
right.
That this and like we've got people are flying hobbyist drones. The FAA is doing all sorts of new regulations. Like even if local police departments want to use drones at a certain elevation that you lose line of sight on, like there's special forms and things that have to be filled out. Yeah. There's all kinds of hoops you have to jump through. No consequences for just letting a small balloon go, though. I thought that was quite interesting.
It is, and it's just there's really not a lot of risk from them or danger from them. Like it's with something like a drone, I'm not sure what the risk of collision is with those, but of them carrying, they have a heavy enough platform to carry surveillance equipment. Like obviously there's the age-old example of like, what if a drone comes in your backyard while you're sunbathing naked or whatever, like that. A pico balloon doesn't really have the capability to do that, to have that kind of risk. And so so they're very low impact in terms of what their risks are. So they just haven't seen the need to regulate them very much.
So what do you think happens now to this community? How have they been reacting in the face of all of this?
Yeah, so the biggest thing they're concerned about, nobody I talked to was really concerned anymore that they're going to get shot down by a jet. I think everybody realizes that was a bit of a mania and an overreaction, and that actually like pico balloonists, they hadn't really been literally on the radar, right? Like for the military or anything. And one person told me like it's crazy that they even came up on the radar maps, like they're that small that they must be presenting a very small radar return. So they're concerned more about the idea that regulations will force them to put like very heavy trackers, the kind of trackers that you need on an aircraft or a larger weather balloon or a larger scientific balloon of any kind. That would basically make the whole thing moot, because these would be like a pound or two, and then you suddenly can't use the pico platform anymore. So there's some concern about that kind of a situation. And they've been very true to their, I think, heritage of being people who are tinkerers and kind of inventors. They've been putting forward kind of what they could offer to the community, the worldwide community, to help to prevent this kind of flare up again. Some suggested that there's just raising awareness of their tracking maps, which are public, to show like, hey, this is where this object is. You can kind of rule out that that's something nefarious because we have the tracker information right here. and also like mandating, if anything, that they put on radar reflectors, which are lightweight and wouldn't interrupt the kind of main stuff that pico balloonists are doing. Those would just make it much more bright on the radar screen, so people would be able to see them a lot better. And one of my sources also suggested just giving the not necessarily like having a clearance system, but just giving the FAA like a heads up warning about launches of these things, so that there's a record of when they launch and where they're going and what their likely paths are. Another really cool thing about these maps is that they have predictive paths. They try to predict where it's going to go. So people can, if an airline pilot is like seeing something weird, there's a pico balloon in this airspace or whatever. But even then, like, so they're just like, they're not going to even cause much of a risk at altitudes like that aircraft are in, because they're just a balloon. So their biggest concern is really that there's going to be some kind of overreaction that's going to affect their community. But a lot of them think that it's just so impractical, like I've been saying, to like, these are just wispy little things. And so they think if there's going to be new regulations, it's probably going to be for kind of the mid-sized 4 pounds and up balloons that are a little more technical to work with.
It's also gotten a lot of people interested in the hobby, right?
Yeah, they say they've gotten like a huge boost in their community. So that's something they're seeing as an upside to all of this, is that a lot more people have been reaching out and asking how they launch their own pico balloons. And so that's great. And it'll be interesting to see how that kind of develops over time. Like, yeah.
So if someone wants to get involved in pico ballooning, where do you go?
I would honestly just like Google the groups. There's forums, there's listservs, there's a bunch of really, they're super like public facing and very friendly community, as I said. So, when I was just asking to talk to them about how they have been feeling this month, like lots of people had lots of opinions and lots of advice for joining. And like, in particular, like one of my people I interviewed is this guy, Steve Randall, who runs a UK company that helps with all kinds of ballooning. Actually, basically everybody I interviewed for this has their own site that you can go to and like ask them questions and help, and they'll help you. But they just kind of walk you through it. There's lots of guides online so that you can pick and choose which community you might want to be a part of based on where you are located. If you're in Northern Illinois, you got the Bottle Cap Brigade, of course. So yeah, I think there's like a lot of different opportunities to get involved.
Just have this like very clear image in my head of like in the style of The Simpsons, like a Boy Scout troop in the middle of a cornfield in Illinois releasing their balloon and being so excited, and then the F-22 just comes in and blows it up right over them.
Exactly.
They all
Mine
look,
was like a Kubrick film that never got made because they were like, "You've gone too far."
this is too wild, Stanley. Can't do
Really?
it.
Yeah, this is a little bit too on the nose.
So another aspect of this, you are primarily a science reporter. You are in like always looking into space, always looking into the skies. So the other thing, the other aspect that I kind of want to get into on this as we kind of close out the conversation is that we are in this moment that I think is only comparable to the 1990s, and I think more apt probably the 1950s, where everyone is obsessed with what's in the skies above us, with extraterrestrial life possibly, but generally like strange lights in the sky, UFOs, and the government is talking about it all the time. And I've lost my camera for some reason.
Where did you
So,
go? Did the government get you?
oh man, I started talking about
Trying
the
to talk
UFOs, and
about the UFOs and the
and
government got you.
and they got rid of me. Here,
Yeah.
we're gonna
And
switch to we're gonna focus
one
on you.
person. Wow, Matthew Gold's over here.
Why do you think why do you think that we are in 2023 have become so obsessed with this idea of weird things in the sky?
Well, I mean, I think that there's been some credence given finally by the Pentagon and NASA, like they're actually doing real studies of these things. So I guess the short answer, honestly, is I don't know, because this is an area that I always find so fascinating, but also like completely um, unfathomable in so many ways, like why certain things flare up at certain times. My best guess is that, yeah, there's been like legitimacy given to it more by the government, and there's big reports going on. NASA has a council that they've convened to put together to look into UFOs. And then I think maybe in the background noise, just because there is a lot of really sophisticated real alien hunting off of Earth kind of going on, right? Like, I think that there's a general rising tide of optimism about being able to detect life elsewhere, because you have like Perseverance on Mars looking. There's a lot of really interesting telescopes that are looking for biosignatures and exoplanets and things like that. So the kind of tangible scenario that you could imagine is beginning to come into view. But I honestly, like, I often, and I don't want to like kick the hornet's nest of UFO stuff, because it's a very rich lore that I am not that immersed in. So I'm not going to cast judgment on that or anything. But I often find these things like, yeah, with UFO sightings and things like that, it in this case it ends up being a weather balloon, and it just seems like terrestrial, the stuff we do, terrestrial humans, the stuff that we're doing is just so that we're doing so much in the skies that it always seems like that's going to be the most plausible explanation to me. Again, I don't want to cast aspersions on what anyone has seen or weird stuff, because I know that it's very much out there, and certainly people are in the government are now looking into it and trying to be a little bit more transparent about it. I think obviously, like, for many decades the government didn't do themselves any favors by basically trying to act like this was something that needed to be shut down immediately as a conversation. But I would be interested in your thoughts too on that, Matthew. Why now? Like, what do you think?
Oh Lord. Let me see if my camera's back. My camera's not back. That's fine. Okay.
That's evidence that, yeah.
You just reacted to me here for a minute. Why do I think that this is going on? Why do I think that we are suddenly obsessed with UFOs? I think there's a couple different things going on. First of all, I think a lot of us are paying attention more to the sky simply because of things like hobbyist balloons and like drones. A lot of us are doing more stuff in the sky and just paying attention to what's up there more. I also think that, you had this wave of people doing things like talking to 60 Minutes, going on to the Joe Rogan podcast, like high profile, respectable, highly credible sources talking about weird stuff that they saw in the sky when they were, fighter pilots for the U.S. Navy. And at the same time, the Pentagon starts acknowledging and releasing those videos. And I think at times, and I think this is borne out, if you look at like the 1950s, which is when I think one of the classic golden age of UFO panics happens, at times of sublimated social strife, people get paranoid and they start looking around in weird places, and they maybe don't trust the government. 1990s was another time that all this stuff became really, really popular, right? The X-Files being the classic example of the time, and you kind of had a revisiting of the Air Force's Project Blue Book and all of this kind of stuff. It surfaces back into the consciousness, and we've got now another time where things feel very weird and very tense. And for a lot of people, things are generally okay, but like your material needs are mostly being met, but everything still feels really screwed up and scary. People start casting about outside of themselves, and they look to the skies, and at the same time, you've got the Pentagon actually talking about it and creating a government office that says that they will study this stuff and releasing new videos. And you've got people like Marco Rubio and other members of Congress like kind of feeding into it and talking about it. And some of it, it's so bizarre because it's hard to kind of parse like what are serious concerns and serious reports and what is just complete bullshit.
Yeah.
Because we have, you know, stuff like the Tic Tac video, and other things, and like all these serious reports. Um, and like somebody in chat just said, you have people like Harry Reid, who I think were fairly serious people. But then you also have senators that are in some of these hearings talking about UFOs with the Pentagon, asking them why there are strange objects in the sky above U.S. nuclear sites, repeating like a conspiracy theory that's provably false and didn't happen. Um,
Yeah,
you
totally.
just got so much more information than people are paying and like casting about outside of themselves and looking around, and it just creates a weird air of paranoia. Um, and so I think I don't know. I think it's all of that. It's all of that stuff, right?
I would love to see if there's an interesting sociological element like the one that you're talking about. There's a particular, I don't know, pattern with times of more UFO sightings or anything like that, and how social conditions are. I think people are also really hungry right now for just like, I don't know, maybe this is a too positive a spin, but like some cosmic connection. I notice that a lot with readers that, just read my standard space stuff, which is just usually about wonderful things that are strange and weird in space. And I think people are just excited that we're learning more about the universe, and maybe there's something going on there where it's like, it's so big. How could we possibly be alone? How could we possibly not be on the radar of some other species? And there's like lots of really interesting scientific studies along those lines too, to give grist to all of that as well. So maybe that's part of it too. I'm thinking also about the fact that Oumuamua caused such a big, the first interstellar object ever discovered a couple of years ago, that caused such a big media
Yeah.
storm as well because of
Was that
speculation.
the cigar shaped object that came
Yeah, I
in?
don't quite know. It was initially looked like a giant blunt.
Yeah.
Like that was the concept art, and then I think they're not actually quite sure what it looked like. It was such a strange object. No one denies it was like nobody expected that to be the first object to come from interstellar space. But famous Harvard astronomer has speculated a lot that it was an alien artifact of some kind, right? So I think that that's kind of gotten into the bloodstream as well.
Well, one of the things I think is super interesting about that is that it entered it entered like our interstellar space that we could see it, and then it pivoted in a way that objects typically don't if they're moving of their own power, right?
Yeah, they still don't. I think there's lots of natural explanations they tried to use, but it did accelerate, and nobody has really been able to account for a lot of its properties. So that's what opened it up to the artificial interpretation. But there's a lot, the wider want to make clear, the wider scientific community believes it had a natural origin, and this could have been like some kind of outgassing effect or something like that caused it to accelerate. But it was just such a weird object. And then a couple years later, a totally normal comet that was from interstellar space came through, and it was like, that is what we expected to see. That was just, look at the normal comet, like any other comet we would have in our own solar system. It's just from interstellar space. So I think what's going to be really interesting on that score is just that there's a lot of surveys, wide field surveys, that are going to detect a lot more of these interstellar objects over the next 10 years. They're guessing like one a year at the low end, or that's a conservative bet. So we'll start to see what the population really is, if there's mostly these weird Oumuamua things, or they're mostly just like standard comments or whatever.
You said something I want to touch on real quick. Reader engagement on this issue. That's one of the things I think is really fascinating about talking about this stuff in particular is every time I write, people are so sure they know what it is, and they will tell you about it. And it is not, definitely not always. I know that it's aliens, and you're reporting on it in a way that it's you're being irresponsible. I get that sometimes, but I also get these are obviously advanced Russian military drones, and it's crazy that you're not saying it. And I also get people from the skeptic community that get mad and say, like, these are obviously lens flares and camera equipment malfunctioning, and it's irresponsible for you to not say that. Like, I get it's very, very like heated in my inbox anytime I write about this stuff, and it's like all of those perspectives. A lot of people are very, very, very sure that they know exactly what this is, and they are upset when you say that perhaps you don't know, and it could be many different things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it speaks to the depth of the rabbit holes that we're all in, right? That I think that there's a lot of evidence you can accrue for many different interpretations, and there's probably some confirmation bias on all sides going on. I would freely admit that, when I say that I just can't seem to muster the imagination that the aliens have visited Earth. I'm sure that's to some extent confirmation bias on my part of just there's it's such an eerie silence out there. I think it seems really unlikely. That's all. So I'm not trying to, but I think there's just the internet has made it possible to search, to run after any tiger out there that you want to chase, and so maybe that's like why people get so convinced that it's a certain way.
Yeah, this kind of speaks to something that somebody said in chat just now. Can the Pentagon really keep as many secrets now because of the internet? That's the difference between last century and this, to me, now that it's just impossible to suppress this kind of thing. I think there's a certain truth to that, right? Because one of the ways that we have the Navy videos that we have are because of Harry Reid and Tom DeLonge from Blink-182, and like getting these things leaked to them and sharing them out. And people, but also people in the military being more willing to talk about it, and there being more vectors of information to share, and there being a thing like the Joe Rogan show for one of these pilots to go on and talk about what happened. It is easier than ever to get on the internet and share information. So I do think that that's a part of it. Like, it is harder than ever for a large-scale conspiracy like Project Blue Book. See, my camera keeps dying. To be buttoned down, and for no leaks to occur. Right?
Are you sure there's not aliens in your room right now? That's why it's not blacking out.
Possibly. I just to get it back on, I just turned it off and turned it back on. I don't know what's happening. I'm very scared.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm generally of the opinion, and maybe this is naive of me, but I'm not sure it would be that easy to hide something of this magnitude. I think there would be people who would leak something like this within the government too. Like as you've been mentioning, there have been, but like something as monumental as like an artifact landing on Earth, an alien artifact or a message or something like that. I think I had the opportunity really recently, for instance, to write an article just sort of speculating about what if a nation tried to monopolize contact with an extraterrestrial if they were the first to receive a message from them. And there was a lot of doubt on that idea just because nations would want to brag about this kind of thing, like we are the ones that first got the message from aliens. Why would we hide that? Why would we, that's prestige. So I think in many ways there's like incentives for governments to be open about this. And as you say, there's so much the ability for people to just be taking their own footage now. I am obsessed with the movie Nope. I love it so much. And I think about that a lot in this context of just like people trying to get that perfect shot of unambiguously an alien, right? And I think that movie plays on this whole theme.
The Oprah moment.
The Oprah moment.
The Oprah moment, yeah. If you're interested in aliens and you haven't seen Nope, you owe it to yourself to go out and watch it.
Just if you just love good movies, man.
That
got robbed. I wish it had gotten a million Oscar nominations. I was very sad to see it didn't get any.
Another comment, like we pulled up that selfie earlier. Individual fighter pilots are taking their own cell phone pictures and then releasing them with no seeming oversight from the Pentagon. That didn't happen before. Plus, open source data initiatives contribute. I think that's absolutely right. I'll pull up that photo again for people that are watching the stream. I think that's an important piece of this. Is like, this was a selfie that this pilot took, and shared around, and was making the rounds. And before the Pentagon then came out and said, yes, this is real, and released it to Divids and other places. It was this image was circulating and had been shared on social media way before the Pentagon said that it was official. And that's a good point. Like, you can't not, like, once you get normal rank and file soldiers involved, even fighter pilots, the cat's out of the bag. They're going to talk about it. Everyone's online now. Everyone's on social media. Everyone's going to share their experiences. So,
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great point.
and I think that and our ringing endorsement of Nope is probably a good place to end this conversation. Becky, thank you so much for coming on to Cyber and walking us through this. What incredible, mind-blowing science story are you working on right now?
I would like to recommend one I just finished that's about the cosmic web, and we love to cover that here, which is, the vast structure that links the universe. And there's a story that's just up about the first glimpse of shocks within this huge structure. So please check that out.
I think we need to have you on again to just do like a roundup of your science stories.
I would love that.
I think we're going to do that in a week or two. And we're going to get on Discord instead of Zoom, and we're going to hope my camera doesn't die.
Perfect. Sounds great.
And I will see you next time, Becky. Thank you for everybody in chat who contributed. Good to be back. Still coughing. Good to be back, though. Bye-bye, everybody.